Hey guys, and welcome back to our third episode of How to FPV. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about, how to hold the radio. Is there a wrong way or a right way? And then also the two main concepts that make an average pilot from a very good pilot, and that is understanding throttle management and spatial awareness. Now those two concepts are extremely important, and we're going to go over as many aspects as possible in this very short video about throttle management and all the tips and tricks I can help you with on throttle management and also spatial awareness and how I assess the space that I'm flying in so that I can ultimately have a safe flight, not only for myself and other people, but for my aircraft and protecting the investment that we've obviously made and not trying to crash and break stuff. So those are the two things that we're going to talk about today, aside from, what's the right and wrong way to hold the radio? Is there a right and wrong way? After coming out with the last two videos, I realized that there were some things that we, probably should hit on before we actually go out and start buying stuff. So we are going to talk about how to practice on the simulator doing spatial awareness and throttle management. So, but first of all, I wanted to talk about a thing that, maybe if you're brand new to this, you don't really understand if there's a right or wrong way to hold the radio. So real briefly, I'm going to talk about the couple different ways, the standard ways that most people hold a radio. Now, these are not, there's no right or wrong way, these are just kind of the standard ways. You have your normal thumb guys, which hold the radio like this, and then you have your pinch guys, which hold the radio kind of like this, and they actually pinch the sticks. Now this is very precise, but it's not as intuitive and natural at feeling as thumbs for most people. And then there's something that I kind of came up with. I didn't necessarily come up with it, but it felt natural to me. And I had seen a couple other people do something similar. I put my thumbs on the tops of the sticks, and then I have my index fingers there as kind of like a guide. In case my thumb slips off, I have something to help guide me, and also have a little bit more dexterity with my index finger than I do with my thumb. So this is my preferred way of holding the radio. Now obviously whatever feels more comfortable for you, or whatever you feel like you need to practice or want to do, that is up to you. But ultimately there are three main ways, and that is thumbs, pinch, and then like a hybrid. And I know people that do all, and they are all great pilots. There's no right or wrong way. There's just different ways. Back to this. So in the last video I talked about getting on the simulator, and we set you up with some rates and some settings, and the thing kind of flies good according to what I think a quad should fly like, which is a quad that flies very natural and has very intuitive flight characteristics. Like when I do something, I want it to feel a certain way, and it does feel that way. So that's kind of what we set up in the previous videos. Now in this video, we wanted to practice something that's going to make us better at throttle management and also spatial awareness. So before we actually get into practicing on the simulator and talking about throttle management and spatial awareness in that sense, I would like to talk about them kind of as an abstract. First of all, I want to talk about spatial awareness, because spatial awareness is something that not everybody is actually going to get or even kind of grasp it in the level or the depth that we're going to talk about today, but I did want to kind of make you aware of what I'm talking about when I am talking about spatial awareness. So when we're talking about typical spatial awareness, when you're talking about flying, say, line of sight, when you're flying around, obviously you're not looking at your hands when you're watching the aircraft, because you need to understand where the aircraft is, and if you're looking at your hands, you don't know where it is. So when you're talking about that, you obviously have some spatial awareness, because you know that the aircraft, hey, it's getting close to that chair, I need to back away from it. Hey, it's getting close to that, it's getting too low to the ground, I need to increase altitude or something like that. So that is all, yes, considered spatial awareness. Now, when we're talking about FPV, we're not physically using our eyes in the real world to understand our spatial awareness. We're talking about not using typical depth perception, which actually most people find very difficult, and this is why a lot of people fly FPV and don't fly line of sight, or they completely skip out on line of sight, which I'll make a video about here in a little bit, because line of sight is extremely important, but not everybody practices it. But yeah, line of sight is actually very difficult, because you have to understand depth perception and put yourself in the actual position or shoes of your drone or whatever aircraft you're flying, and whatever orientation it is in. You have to understand that the input might not do what you think it's going to do, because the aircraft's looking at you, and now up is, or forward is down, and back is up, and left is right, and all these things are reversed because the orientation of the aircraft is different than you originally when you took off. So we're talking about spatial awareness with FPV. It's actually a lot more in depth than you would think, because we're actually looking through a frame. We're looking at a little tiny frame in the world. we're not actually getting all of this peripheral vision that we normally get with our eyeballs. So when you're talking about looking through a frame, taking an image of the environment around us through one little tiny area, a little tiny view, it's actually hindering us a lot because we can't see behind us, we can't turn our heads around, we have to physically turn the drone around. It's like an owl or something. You gotta like turn your whole head around. You can't look around with your eyeballs because the drone is now our head essentially, and we have to turn to be able to look at things. We have no peripheral vision, and we also don't have depth perception. So all of our depth perception is perceived depth perception. When I talk about depth perception, you know, if someone throws a ball at you and you try to catch it, obviously you're using both of your eyeballs and you have what's called depth perception. You can gauge how far this thing is away from you so that you can adjust where your hand is so you can catch the ball. Have you ever tried to catch a ball with one eye closed? It's a lot harder because you don't have the same depth perception. And usually how you get good at it, if you can do it and you are good at it, it's more about knowing your body and knowing the perceived depth perception, because you don't actually have the physical gauging of the object from two different areas from both eyes. You actually have one and you're like, okay, well, I know that that thing is here, and I know that my hand based on how I feel is here, and you can make an assessment based on that. But it's usually learned through practice rather than learn just through being able to do it. So that's kind of the same thing that we're talking about. We're talking about depth perception on a drone. It's all perceived. When you're looking through a camera and you understand, you know, hey, in this particular field of view on this particular camera, this is actually how far I can go before I touch something. So it's all perceived depth perception, and also understanding, taking a snapshot of the actual environment that you're flying in, or taking a mental note saying, hey, this tree is here, my physical body is to the left of this tree based on this orientation. When I take off and I'm flying away from myself, the sun is up and to my left. And all of these things, you don't need to be physically going out there and like, you know, taking notes. But these things are something that over time you will eventually just subconsciously grab onto, so that when you fly out and you get disoriented, you can go, oh, okay, well the sun was to the left here. If I fly, you know, I can blip the throttle and listen, and I can hear the quad, and I can use an audio cue to help myself get back to where I am based on the visual cues that I took, and also based on maybe an audio cue by blipping the throttle and taking note. Okay, my face was facing that tree. I hear the quad over here. Okay, it's to my right, you know, based on things like that. So that's all spatial awareness, and it's all something that over time you will get better and better at, but you do need to be aware of that. Now, throttle management, which is something that is extremely important in flying any aircraft that can hover, because throttle management is something it's like a clutch in a car. You don't just like, it's not on or off. You're always massaging it in some way. You're adding a little bit of throttle, you're massaging, you're letting the clutch disc grab. If any of you guys have ever driven a manual car, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, then you will understand based on experience through here. Throttle is not something that's either in a position or not in a position. There's no like right or wrong position for throttle. I mean, some people will say that there is, and it's full throttle or zero throttle and that's it, but we don't fly on a throttle on a switch. We fly on something that has very large resolution and something that can adjust speeds extremely accurately and also extremely quickly. So when you're talking about throttle resolution, we're talking about something where we're going to be massaging the throttle to get the desired output that we want. And usually that means small adjustments very rapidly and consistently, and it's not always, they're not always like moving the throttle like that, but it is something that you're always kind of adjusting. You're never just locking it into one place, and that may be a concept that a lot of you guys thought was something wrong, or thought was something you were doing wrong because the desired effect you wanted was causing you to freaking have a seizure with your left hand. Now, this is something that you will learn with time, and it will also come and get a little bit easier as you practice it more, and it won't feel so alien, because you're not going to be, you know, just going full throttle. You're not going to be going to one throttle position and holding it there. When you turn, the aircraft actually loses lift and starts to sink, so you have to increase throttle. And if you're constantly going in a straight line, yeah, you can probably lock the throttle in a position and just let it go, which I've done many times. I just lock everything into a position, get it locked in, and I can just take my hands off and the quad will just fly in a straight line forever. But if you're low to the ground, you're going to notice that the quad may dip because, you know, a gust of wind hit it. There's all these subtle things that are actually acting on the quad that you don't notice unless you're near something and you have that reference point. So again, we're going to talk about some things that you can do on Velocidrone today that will help you with spatial awareness and also throttle management. So let's go ahead and get on the game right now. And I'll show you a little bit of things that you can do to practice throttle management and also practice your spatial awareness. So when we're talking about spatial awareness, we just need to kind of, you know, pick up, look around, maybe explore our environment a little bit before we ultimately, you know, rip it, I guess. Now, the one thing that I can say that makes a really, really good pilot from an average pilot is being able to fly a new spot and make very quick spatial awareness decisions. Wow, sorry, I'm like trying to talk and ramming things. So power lines, for example. In the real world, power lines are an extremely unseeable and dangerous thing. If you've ever flown FPV or you know someone that's flown FPV, you probably have heard them talk about power lines. Anything in aviation hates power lines because you can't see them, especially in our low quality goggles, our low quality resolution FPV image. You're not going to be able to see those power lines, and also you're not going to be able to, if you hit one, it's going to be a bad day. So knowing where power lines are, knowing like, hey, you know, if I fly this low here, something could pop out from the corner there might be a car, or you're not saying that you're flying in, you know, places where there are going to be cars, but you kind of get the idea. You want to be aware of what you're flying around and any possible hazards that may give themselves out to you at the last moment, causing you to crash or causing you to possibly break something or hurt somebody. Now, we've understood spatial awareness. It's something that's going to grow over time. You're not just going to be amazing at spatial awareness initially, but you do need to take the concept into consideration when you go out and fly. You need to say, hey, I need to assess the area first and understand where I am in relation to me flying, so that if I do crash, I need to be able to get back to myself or go find my drone. And this is a huge problem with flying FPV, is you crash and you don't know where you went down. Now, there's a couple ways to get around that, and I'll talk about them in future videos, but basically you need to know where you went down. You need to know where you crashed, and you base it off of a visual cue of where you just were. And that's why DVR in our goggles, which I'll talk about in a later video, is very important, because if you don't know where you are, you can review the video and you can say, hey, I was near that landmark, I crashed there, I should be in this area. When you get close to where you think it is, you can blip the throttle or turn the quad on a drone or arm it or something, so that you can actually hear it and then find the aircraft. So those are all subtle secrets, or subtle little things you can do to find an aircraft if you go down and you don't know where you went down. But ultimately, if you have good spatial awareness, you won't run into those problems and you'll have a good day. I'm sure a few of you guys are guilty of not having good spatial awareness and losing aircraft. So now the one thing that I did want to talk about, other than spatial awareness, because I feel like that's an ongoing topic and we're going to talk about it in the future, is throttle management. Now, throttle management is something that you can practice. Obviously, punching gates, which I'll do here in a minute, is something you can practice. But I think the best way to do throttle management is to get low to the ground and try to stay low to the ground. Pick a road or pick something to follow and just stay low to the ground. And then, you know, try to turn around and then come back down low to the ground and stay low. That's the whole thing about throttle management. You see my left stick is constantly massaging the throttle. It's massaging the throttle to get the desired output that I want. If I hold it consistent and I start turning, you'll see that I start ballooning, and I'm like, it's never good if I'm up and down. It's always a constant little massage here and there. And I'm over exaggerating it a little bit so that you guys can see what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, it is very much like what you're seeing. It's very much like a small little movement all the time. And if you've ever watched any of my stick cam videos and you see me cruising low to the ground, you'll understand that throttle management and this massaging of the throttle is very important, and I do it on a regular basis. So, throttle management, that is something that you definitely need to work on. Staying low to the ground, or staying low to something, doesn't necessarily have to be the ground. Trying to maintain a particular altitude the entire time. All of these things come with really good throttle management, and you're not going to be able to do them if you don't have good throttle management. Now, obviously, I'm not a racer. I don't race. I do think that, you know, for understanding throttle management, understanding how to, you know, have a desired target to punch through, using racing gates is definitely important. So, you know, I would advise you guys, once you get comfortable with a little bit of throttle management, a little bit of spatial awareness, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to start trying to punch gates. And you'll probably find this very hard, but at the end of the day, all of this stuff, understanding, like having a target, having something where you can go, and I've never flown this track before in my life, so I have no idea where I'm going. But you see, like, having a target, having something.
14.1.
Oh man, that was a fast lap. Having something where you can go and fly an area and have something to be able to fly through or do some tricks through. All of these things are going to help you be a better pilot, but give you that experience, give you that practice that you need to be able to ultimately do what you want to do, which I don't know what you want to do. I'm sure you just want to fly and have fun, and all of that comes with a lot of practice. So do as much as you can practicing. You know, you can increase your speeds, you can do all kinds of stuff, you know. I'm sure some racer dude's gonna be like, dude, I do like 4-second laps there. So anyways, practice throttle management and understand spatial awareness. Get just aware of the concept, and in future videos we're gonna talk about all of these concepts again, and then putting them into effect on a larger aircraft and actually going out into the world, which actually throws a huge wrench into the situation, and it will get really complicated really quick. So if you're familiar with it now, ultimately you'll have a better experience in the end. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If you have people that are interested in FPV and they might benefit from this video, please share it with them. Hope you can see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Peace.